At the beginning of the drama, we see a little girl with her father, who is explaining to her, there are 3 great gods who control the world: water god, sky god, and earth god. Among the 3, the water god is the greatest and holds authority over everything. However, these gods have no king, so they need one. Then we are introduced to Ha-Baek, the main character of the drama. A servant approaches him, bringing a message from the head priest. The servant says, if you want to become the king, you must find 3 stones. These stones are in the possession of gods on earth. To help him, the servant gives him a map. Ha-Baek, who is the water god, prepares to go to earth and takes his servant Nam-Suri along with him, as Nam-Suri has been to earth before. On the other hand, we see the female lead, So-Ah, who is a psychiatrist. She faces several problems while working with a mental health patient, but her friend helps her. Later, she goes out for a meal with her friend, where he says, here's a long list of bills. So Ah becomes upset because she doesn't have enough money to pay the bills, which include her clinic and house rent. After this, So-Ah finds a diamond ring while digging, which was given to her by her ex-boyfriend. She thinks, I'll sell this ring to pay my house rent and move to a better country far away from here. Just then, she looks up at the sky and sees a shooting star. She begins to pray, and at that moment, the water god falls on her, causing her to faint. The water god arrives on Earth without any clothes and knows nothing about human life. Ha-Baek then wears So-Ah's clothes. When he sees her unconscious, he uses his powers to revive her and leaves. Upon regaining consciousness, So-Ah notices that her apron and diamond ring are missing. She says, that boy is a thief. I won't let him go. Ha-Baek overhears her and becomes angry, saying, she called me a thief. In anger, Ha-Baek starts approaching So-Ah, but remembers, if I go there, she'll take these clothes back too. So he decides not to approach her. Later, Ha-Baek's servant Nam-Suri arrives. Seeing his clothes, Ha-Baek says, you're wearing a very nice outfit. He then exchanges clothes with him. Ha-Baek says, all my powers have disappeared since I came here, and I've also lost the map. Let's go back. Nam-Suri replies, to return we need to go to a special place. He adds, but first I need to change my clothes, and leaves. So-Ah then arrives at the scene. Ha-Baek recognizes her as the same girl who called him a thief. He approaches her and says, I didn't do all this intentionally. However, So-Ah refuses to listen and ignores him. Angrily, Ha-Baek says, mental woman, how dare you ignore me? I am the water god, and you are my servant. Hearing this, So-Ah assumes that Ha-Baek is a mental patient and says, here's my psychiatrist card, before leaving. In the next scene, Nam-Suri returns to Ha-Baek and takes him to another place. Pointing towards a children's tent, he says, we will have to stay here tonight. We will leave tomorrow morning. The next morning, Ha-Baek and Nam-Suri are walking towards a location. Suddenly, Ha-Baek notices humans holding mobile phones. He asks Nam-Suri, what are these humans holding? Nam-Suri replies, I don't know, but it doesn't look like something to eat. Then he says, I'm very hungry. Ha-Baek responds, you can eat once we return. On the other side, So-Ah decides to sell her property. When she arrives at her land, she sees Ha-Baek and Nam-Suri already there. So she asks them, do you want to buy this land? Ha-Baek approaches her and says, this land belongs to the water god, meaning it's ours. He then tries to use his powers but fails, as all his powers have been drained after arriving on Earth. So A gets back into her car. Suddenly, Nam-Suri jumps in front of her car, startling her. In reality, Ha-Baek had pushed Nam-Suri. So Ah is then forced to let Ha-Baek and Nam-Suri into her car. On the way, the car runs out of fuel. Nam-Suri says, you both wait here, I'll get the fuel. While walking, So-Ah spots a wild boar. Terrified, she grabs Ha-Baek's hand and starts running. Ha-Baek initially doesn't understand what's happening. Once he realizes, he tightly holds So-Ah's hand, and both of them run quickly as the boar chases them. They hide in the car's trunk. The boar pounds on the trunk, causing So-Ah to panic and hug Ha-Baek. Ha-Baek hugs her back. After a while, the boar leaves. Nam-Suri arrives and helps them out of the trunk, and the 3 get back into the car. Later, Ha-Baek starts driving the car. Nam-Suri asks him, do you know how to drive? Ha-Baek replies, I just learned by watching So-Ah. Hearing this, So-Ah gets annoyed and asks Ha-Baek, do you have a driver's license? Ha-Baek responds, mental woman, how dare you speak to a god like this? Angry, So-Ah tells Ha-Baek to stop the car. Ha-Baek stops and So-Ah gets out. Ha-Baek and Nam-Suri also step out after her. So-Ah thanks him for driving the car and starts to walk away. Ha-Baek tells Nam-Suri, now I have only one option left. I'll have to kiss her to make her remember everything. He follows So-ah, grabs her, and kisses her. However, Ha-baek's powers don't work, and So-ah doesn't remember anything. Nam-soo-ri arrives, pulls Ha-baek away, and takes him with him. So-ah screams loudly. Nam-soo-ri explains to Ha-baek that on Earth, doing anything against a woman's will is a crime. He then stops Ha-baek from going back to So-ah. Meanwhile, So-ah is shown at home, thinking about Ha-baek's kiss and seeing it everywhere around her. The next morning, Nam-soo-ri and Ha-baek are heading to So-ah's clinic. On the way, they see a roller skating competition with a cash prize for the winner. Nam-soo-ri tells Ha-baek, "You should participate in this competition. When you win, we will get a lot of money so that we can buy food." Ha-baek agrees. Then, Ha-baek starts skating and impresses everyone with his roller skating skills. So-ah also arrives there and watches him skate. Ha-baek notices her, and So-ah, seeing this, runs away. Ha-baek follows her on roller skates, but So-ah manages to escape. Ha-baek thinks So-ah has remembered everything, that she is the servant of a god, so he goes to meet her. Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri take a taxi towards So-ah's clinic. On the way, Ha-baek tells the driver, "From here, I will drive." Hearing this, the taxi driver drops them off right there. They then take another taxi and reach So-ah's clinic, where she is already standing outside. While crossing the road, she encounters Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri. Ha-baek says, "I know you've remembered everything because you are the servant of a god. Now arrange food and a place for us to stay." So-ah thinks Ha-baek is crazy, so she pulls Nam-soo-ri aside and tells him to get Ha-baek properly treated. But Nam-soo-ri pleads with So-ah for help, saying, "We don't even have food or a place to stay, so please help us." So-ah replies, "I live in a rented house myself, I can't help you." Then she goes to Ha-baek and says, "Don't follow me after this. If you do, I will file a police complaint against you." She then leaves. So-ah then visits her landlord and requests a reduction in rent, but the landlord tells her to leave the property instead. Another man named Shin is sitting there, and observing So-ah's situation, realizes she doesn't have money. Later, when So-ah is near the elevator, Shin meets her and forgives all her debts. Ah wonders, all this is happening because of Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri. I didn't help them, and now maybe their curse is affecting me. On the other side, Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri are traveling on a train. A child sitting in front of Ha-baek is eating something. Watching this affects Ha-baek negatively, because he never used to feel hunger before. But seeing the child eat, he starts to feel hungry. He controls himself and turns his head away. Meanwhile, a girl nearby is listening to a song by a famous actress, Mu-ra, on her mobile. Upon seeing Mu-ra, Ha-baek recognizes her because she is also a god and possesses a stone. At that moment, the train stops, and the girl gets off at her station. Ha-baek follows her and tries to find her, but the crowd is so dense that she escapes. Because of the crowd, Nam-soo-ri gets stuck on the train. When he tries to get off, the train doors lock. Ha-baek tries to help him, but he cannot do anything. The train leaves, and Nam-soo-ri remains on board. After the train departs, Ha-baek notices a man on the opposite platform. This man is the same person whose illness So-ah had been treating. The man recognizes Ha-baek because he is also from the same planet. The two of them return to Ha-baek's tent, where the man brings Ha-baek a lot of food. Meanwhile, So-ah is searching for Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri. She then comes across a social media post by the man, which also features Ha-baek. Seeing this, So-ah understands where Ha-baek is. She immediately goes there to meet him. When So-ah arrives, the man, seeing her, is frightened and shouts, "If anyone comes near me, I will jump into the water." So-ah tries to explain to him, but he does not listen and jumps into the water. So-ah asks Ha-baek to save him, and Ha-baek gives his food to So-ah, saying, "Keep this for me until I return." Then Ha-baek jumps into the water to save the man. For a long time, Ha-baek and the man do not come out of the water, which causes So-ah to become anxious and sit there crying. Then she remembers that she, too, once tried to commit suicide by jumping into the water in the same way. Remembering this, So-ah cries even more. Then Ha-baek comes out with the man, saying, "I have saved him." So-ah goes to the man and tries to bring him back to consciousness. Ha-baek sees that his food is on the ground and, seeing this, becomes very angry. He says to So-ah, "This was Nam-soo-ri's food and you dropped it on the ground. Nam-soo-ri is very hungry. Now what will he eat?" So-ah brings the man to consciousness and then, becoming emotional, embraces Ha-baek. Habik is stunned. Then, at night, the police come there and put the man in an ambulance and take him away. After this, So-ah tries to apologize to Habik, but Habik does not listen to her. He angrily says, "The food you ruined was for Nam-suri. Now what will he eat? He must be very hungry." So-ah tries to explain, but Habik is not at all willing to listen to her and tells her to leave. When So-ah does not leave, Habik leaves himself. After he leaves, So-ah begins to hear strange noises. She looks around, but there is no one there. The next morning, So-ah is drying clothes inside her home, and she hears the sounds of the trees talking. Hearing these sounds, So-ah becomes very frightened. Later, she begins to hear the sounds of small things, which make her even more disturbed. So-ah puts cotton in her ears, but she still hears the sounds. Seeing all this, So-ah becomes very stressed and tries to understand what is happening. And because of all this, So-ah does not sleep all night. The next day, Habik is sitting in his tent eating. He is eating very quickly when a beggar comes to him. Habik, seeing him, hides his food and turns his face away, then begins eating. A little later, So-ah comes there. She has not slept all night, so dark circles have appeared under her eyes. Seeing the dark circles under her eyes, Habik asks her, "What happened?" So-ah says, "It's all because of you." Habik asks, "Because of me? But how?" Then, So-ah begins to tell him something, but her leg twists and she begins to fall. Habik catches her hand and supports her. Then Habik says, "Today I was thinking about you all day." So-ah pulls her hand away and asks, "So what were you thinking about me?" Then Habik says, "That you are very stupid." So-ah is somewhat surprised because she was expecting something different from him. After that, she leaves the place. In the next scene, So-ah is on her way to her college reunion party. However, she is extremely tired, so she feels exhausted and sits down for a moment. Just then, Shin arrives and offers her a lift. So-ah gets into his car and they both reach the party. At the party, So-ah meets an old college friend who is saying a lot of negative things about her. So-ah silently listens. But when the friend says, "Your dad used to help everyone, yet he left you all alone," So-ah becomes furious and starts arguing with her. During the argument, the friend grabs So-ah's dress, tearing it. So-ah then says, "Now everyone must have realized what a horrible person you are." She leaves the party, and after her departure, everyone criticizes the friend for her behavior. When So-ah steps outside, the same friend follows her. Just as she is about to say something, Habik arrives and stops her. He says, "So-ah is with me. You won't say anything to her. If you do, it won't be good for you." At that moment, others gather around and start recording Habik and the friend on their phones. Embarrassed, the friend leaves without saying anything. Habik then approaches So-ah and puts his coat around her shoulders to make her feel comfortable. Habik calls for a taxi and helps So-ah into it. Seeing this, Nam-suri is shocked and says, "Habik has never put in this much effort for anyone before, but now he's doing it for So-ah." The three of them then get into the taxi and return to their place. Once they arrive, So-ah gives Habik his coat back. Irritated, Habik says, "You humans don't even know how to say thank you. The water god helped you and you're leaving without saying anything." So-ah replies, "What do you want?" Habik then takes her to a mobile shop and says, "Buy phones for me and Nam-suri." So-ah doesn't have enough money to buy expensive phones, so she purchases cheap ones for them. Later, Habik and Nam-suri sit outside the shop looking at their phones, while So-ah observes their reactions, feeling confused. Later, the three head to the lakeside. Habik says to So-ah, "Help me find the gods. I figured out where they are, but you need to take me there. After that, I'll send you back quickly." So-ah agrees. The next day, Habik and So-ah arrive at a hotel. Outside the hotel, Habik asks So-ah to wait in the car, saying, "Stay here, I'll go inside and finish my work." Inside the hotel, Habik sees Mu-ra during her shoot. He becomes very excited because he knows she is a god. While waiting in the car, So-ah sees Shin arrive. He asks her, "What are you doing here?" So-ah replies, "I came here for some work." Shin tells her, "This hotel belongs to me, and a famous actress, Mu-ra, is shooting inside." Hearing this, So-ah is shocked and nervous because she thinks Mu-ra's security might cause trouble for Habik. So-ah quickly rushes inside the hotel. On the other hand, Habik is on his way to meet Mu-ra, but her guards stop him. They don't allow him to go inside and start fighting with him. Just then, So-ah arrives and tries to save Habik, but the guards also overpower her and start hitting her. Seeing this, Habaek becomes extremely angry and starts fighting with the guards. Mura sits on the side, watching the entire scene. She doesn't like seeing Habaek and Soa together and feels very jealous. After the fight ends, Mura approaches Habaek and slaps him. Soa gets very angry seeing this and starts arguing with Mura. Mura says, "Why are you interfering between us?" Soa responds, "I am Habaek's guide." Mura retorts, "You don't seem like a guide. You look like a mental patient to me." Soa hands her a business card and says, "Come to me for treatment for your brain." Saying this, she grabs Habaek's hand and walks away with him. After they leave, Mura calls the second god, Huye, and explains the situation. She tells him, "Habaek came here for the stone, but I somehow managed to drive him away." Huye replies, "Handle him for now, I'll figure out what to do." Meanwhile, Soa takes Habaek and Namsu-ri to a building and tells them there's another god here who can help them. Soa goes inside and meets her friend, requesting her to lie to Habaek and pretend to be a god. Habaek meets the friend, and they start talking. However, after some time, Habaek realizes she is not a real god and says, "I know you're not a real god. Leave this place." When the friend leaves, she calls Soa and says, "Habaek found out I'm not a real god. I'm leaving. You handle him now." Hearing this, Soa becomes scared because she lied to Habaek. She meets him and tries to apologize, but Habaek is furious and says, "I trusted you, and you betrayed me." Hearing this, Soa becomes very sad and apologizes, but Habaek doesn't listen to her and asks her to leave. Soa walks away. As she's going down the stairs, a man covers her mouth and drags her to the terrace, attempting to push her off. Soa tries her best to save herself. Meanwhile, Namsu-ri is downstairs, using his new phone. When he looks toward the terrace, he sees someone trying to push Soa off. Namsu-ri immediately calls Habaek. Habaek sees the call but doesn't know how to answer it. He keeps tapping on Namsu-ri's name but cannot pick up the call. Finally, he manages to answer it, and Namsu-ri informs him that someone is trying to throw Soa off the terrace. Habaek replies, "Soa isn't here, she already left." But when he turns around, he sees Soa being pushed off the terrace. Shocked, he drops his phone and runs, jumping out of the window. At that moment, his powers activate, and he saves Soa from falling. Once they are on the ground, Soa is in shock and speechless upon seeing Habaek's powers. Habaek says, "I told you I'm a god, but you didn't believe me." Soa faints on the spot. Habaek and Namsu-ri take her back to their tent. When she regains consciousness, she finds herself in their tent. She asks, "Am I dreaming?" Habaek pinches her and says, "This is not a dream." Hearing this, Soa is shocked and runs away. She goes to her car, but the door won't open. Habaek arrives, opens the door for her, and notices she's very frightened. He and Namsu-ri then decide to drop her off at her house. When she enters her house, Namsu-ri deliberately pushes Habaek inside and says, "Now that a god is in your house, you can't make him leave." Forced, Soa agrees to let them stay. Habaek is surprised by Namsu-ri's cleverness. So gives them a room on her rooftop. While wandering on the roof, Habaek notices a man watching them, but chooses to ignore him. The next morning, Soa goes to the rooftop to call Habaek and sees him bathing in the open. She says, "How can you bathe out in the open like this?" Habaek hears her and starts to stand up without any clothes on. Panicked, Soa tells him not to stand and brings him a towel, saying, "Wrap this first, then get up." Habaek complies. In the next scene, Soa is at her clinic asking her friend, "Tell me, have I done something bad that all this is happening to me?" Her friend lists several names and says, "You've wronged many people." Meanwhile, Habaek finds his clothes dirty and changes into new ones. However, he dislikes the new outfit and tells Namsu-ri, "I don't like this outfit. I'm not wearing it." Namsu-ri says, "No problem. We'll get new clothes." They head to Soa's clinic. As Soa is leaving, she sees them coming and runs back to the clinic. Habaek sees her and calls out to her, but she doesn't listen. Then he calls her servant, which makes her stop abruptly. He approaches her and says, "What's the matter? I've been calling you, but you're not listening." She responds, "It's nothing. I had some work in the clinic." Habaek then says, "I need new clothes, so buy me new ones." Then Soa takes Habaek to a store, where he tries on many clothes. However, none of the outfits please So-ah because they are too expensive. She says, "These clothes aren't good." She then takes him to a local shop and selects clothes for him there. This angers Ha-baek as he thinks, "She rejected such fine clothes, and now she's offering me these cheap ones." He doesn't look at the clothes she picked. The shopkeeper flatters him, and Ha-baek agrees to take the inexpensive clothes. Afterward, Ha-baek changes into the new clothes. After this, they go to eat. So-ah asks him, "Do you completely trust Mu-ra to help you?" Ha-baek responds, "Yes, I trust Mu-ra completely." So-ah advises him, "You shouldn't trust anyone so much." Ha-baek then asks, "Why are you saying that? Did someone betray your trust, leading you to attempt suicide?" Hearing this, So-ah falls silent. Just then, her friend calls and tells her, "I found a client for the land you want to sell, so come to the clinic quickly." So-ah rushes to the clinic. At the clinic, So-ah receives a call from the client's assistant. She says, "I want to talk directly with your boss. I'll only deal with him," and then ends the call. Her friend asks, "You want to sell the land? So why did you speak like that?" She replies, "I wanted to raise the price of my land, so I said that." Later, the client, revealed to be Shin, calls her and asks her to meet him. Meanwhile, Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri are returning home when they meet Mu-ra on the way. They accompany her to her house. Ha-baek asks her, "Give me the stone so I can leave this place." Mu-ra responds, "Why should I give you the stone? You don't even have your powers right now." She then scolds him harshly. Ha-baek feels uncomfortable and extremely angry hearing her words. On the other side, So-ah and Shin are discussing a deal. So-ah says, "I want 5 times the price for this land." Shin replies, "I was ready to offer you 7 times the price." Hearing this, So-ah is shocked and regrets ruining such a great deal. She tells Shin, "I'm not selling the land anymore," and leaves. Meanwhile, Ha-baek, still very angry, also leaves Mu-ra's place. So-ah feels troubled over her mistake and wanders around. Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri find her, and Ha-baek asks, "What happened?" Elsewhere, Mu-ra calls second god Ye and says, "I can't lie anymore." Ye assures her, "Don't worry, I've thought of something." Ha-baek and So-ah are talking when Shin appears and says, "I'm still ready to offer you 7 times the price." So-ah responds, "Let's discuss this somewhere else," and they leave. Ha-baek feels a negative vibe from Shin as he watches them. Later, Ha-baek practices reading and writing Korean at home. When So-ah returns, Ha-baek waits for her on the path. So-ah approaches him and says, "I knew you'd be hungry, so I brought food." Ha-baek replies, "I'm not hungry. I was just waiting for you." As So-ah moves forward, Ha-baek's stomach growls. She starts laughing. Later, the 3 of them eat dinner together. During dinner, So-ah tells them, "We're going on a picnic tomorrow." The next day, they head to the beach and enjoy themselves, taking selfies and relaxing. At another spot, So-ah asks Ha-baek, "Are you married?" Ha-baek smiles and says, "No, I'm still single." So-ah says, "I thought you'd be married with kids by now." They laugh and continue talking casually. Eventually, So-ah becomes tired and falls asleep near Ha-baek, who watches her. When Nam-soo-ri calls out loudly, So-ah wakes up to find Ha-baek staring at her. Embarrassed, Ha-baek quickly looks away. So-ah says, "Let's leave now," and they head back to their car. As So-ah reaches to open the car door, Ha-baek says, "I'll drive today." He takes the keys and sits in the driver's seat. So-ah protests, "You don't have a license, you can't drive." But Ha-baek ignores her and starts the car. As they drive, the traffic light turns red. Ha-baek tries to stop the car but finds the brakes aren't working. So-ah panics and shouts, "Stop the car!" Ha-baek says the brakes have failed. He steers the car sharply to avoid an accident. They approach a tunnel, but the road ahead is blocked. Ha-baek attempts to activate his powers, but they don't work. Despite the blockage, they drive into the tunnel. Ha-baek tells Nam-soo-ri to control the car while he climbs onto the roof. He takes So-ah onto the roof as well, saying, "Trust me." At that moment, his powers activate, and he uses them to save So-ah. Nam-soo-ri also jumps out of the moving car, and all 3 survive the ordeal. Nam-soo-ri asks Ha-baek, "Have your powers fully activated now?" Ha-baek, looking serious, replies, "No, they only activate for a little time during critical situations." Hearing this, Nam-soo-ri sits on the ground, frustrated, and says, "After all this effort, your powers still aren't fully activated." So-ah, confused, asks Ha-baek, "What are you talking about?" Ha-baek avoids the question and says, "We should file a police complaint against the person who tampered with the car's brakes." They go to the police station, and So-ah files a complaint. The police act swiftly and catch the culprit. When So-ah sees the man, she is shocked and says, "I know him from before. This person has hit my car once before, At that time, I also wanted to file a police report against them, but they stopped me. Even then, I filed a complaint against them with the police. So angrily says, and now he have tampered with my car's brakes. This time, please make sure he is arrested. The police arrest the person and send them to jail. Afterward, goes to the market and buys a lot of food. Meanwhile, Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri are at home. From the conversation between Nam-soo-ri and Ha-baek, it is revealed that Ha-baek had already informed Nam-soo-ri that the car brakes had failed. Nam-soo-ri is about to inform So-ah about this, but Ha-baek stops him saying, I want to see if my powers activate in case of trouble. In the next scene, So-ah tries to cook, but the food doesn't turn out well. In the end, she serves instant noodles to everyone. Then Nam-soo-ri and Ha-baek are watching TV, while So-ah keeps changing the channels. In the cooking show, a handsome chef appears, and So-ah is impressed, saying, he's so handsome. Ha-baek, watching as well, remarks, I can cook like that too. He then goes to the kitchen and makes an excellent dish, which impresses So-ah. Afterward, they set the table and have a candlelight dinner together. After dinner, Nam-soo-ri falls asleep while Ha-baek and So-ah stand nearby. Nam-soo-ri is about to fall, but Ha-baek catches him. At that moment, So-ah grabs Ha-baek from behind and Ha-baek looks at her. A romantic moment is created between them. The next morning, So-ah wakes up confused about where she is. She then sees Ha-baek sleeping on the sofa nearby. Quickly getting up, she asks Ha-baek, how did you bring me here last night? Ha-baek replies, don't you remember anything? So-ah says, no, and tries to recall. A flashback is shown where So-ah, after drinking, started dancing and bothering Nam-soo-ri. When Ha-baek, frustrated, went to his room, So-ah came to him during the night and slept on Ha-baek's bed, forcing him to sleep on the sofa. Remembering all this, So-ah feels embarrassed and tries to leave. Then Nam-soo-ri gets a call from another god, Ray, who calls them for a meeting. After the call, Nam-soo-ri asks Ha-baek whether it would be right to take So-ah along. He says, we've already put So-ah in trouble before. So-ah overhears this conversation and learns about the brake failure incident. She angrily starts shouting at Ha-baek, thinking he intentionally put her in danger. But Ha-baek explains, my intentions were not wrong. However, So-ah, still angry, refuses to listen and leaves. Nam-soo-ri follows her and tries to explain, we are here on a mission, and Ha-baek's powers are essential to complete it. After our mission is complete, we will return. At that moment, Ha-baek arrives and tells Nam-soo-ri, let's go meet the other god, Ray. Then both of them leave. So-ah, overhearing their conversation, becomes upset because she does not want Ha-baek to leave her. When Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri get into the car, So-ah also gets in and insists on going with them. She hands over all her bills to Ha-baek and says, you can't leave without paying these. You live with me, so now you must pay these bills. What if your mission is completed, and you leave without telling me? That's why I'll go with you. Ha-baek is forced to agree, and the three of them go to Ray's house. They meet the other god, Ray. Ha-baek says to him, it's been a long time since we met. Ray starts looking at So-ah, and the moment So-ah sees him, she faints because Ray was her ex-boyfriend. When she regains consciousness and sees Ray again, she faints once more. Ray and Ha-baek talk, but So-ah repeatedly feels uneasy looking at Ray and keeps fainting. When Ha-baek asks Ray for the stone, Ray replies, first, regain your powers. Only then will you get the stone. Ray refuses to help them. As Ha-baek prepares to leave with So-ah, Ray says, let So-ah stay here. It's been a long time since I've seen her and I want to talk to her. Ray approaches So-ah and is about to touch her when Ha-baek stops him and picks So-ah up, taking her away. After returning home, when So-ah regains consciousness, she comes outside. Ha-baek asks her, will you tell me if Ray is your ex-boyfriend? So-ah pretends to faint again. Ha-baek shouts at her, and she immediately stands up straight but quietly goes and sits down. Ha-baek asks her again, tell me the truth. Was Ray your ex-boyfriend? So-ah says, yes, he was. He was my ex-boyfriend. Then she adds, how can he be a god? He's a terrible person. She then starts wondering, was I dating a god? Meanwhile, Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri go to meet Mu-ra. There, Ha-baek tells Mu-ra, I asked the other god for the stone, but he refused to give it to me. Give me your stone. Mu-ra replies, I won't give you the stone. First, bring Ray to me, then I'll give you the stone. Mu-ra then leaves and sits in her car. She feels very sad and apologizes to Ha-baek, saying, forgive me, I hurt you. She also admits, I don't have the stone. As she says all this, Ray is sitting behind her. He asks her, what's wrong with you? Mu-ra replies, I can't do this anymore. It is revealed here that Mu-ra likes Ha-baek. And Ray likes Mu-ra. Ray had even proposed to Mu-ra, but she rejected him. On the other hand, Ha-baek and Nam-su-ri are on their way to So-ah's clinic. When So-ah steps outside for some work, Ray meets her and says, "Come with me," but So-ah refuses. Then Ray forcibly makes her sit in his car and uses his powers to lock the door. As Ray is driving away, Nam-su-ri and Ha-baek arrive. Ray says goodbye to Ha-baek and starts to leave. As Ray is leaving, Ha-baek notices that So-ah is in Ray's car. Ha-baek immediately starts chasing the car, but Ray uses his powers to increase the car's speed, making it impossible for Ha-baek to catch him. At one point, Ray stops the car, takes So-ah out, and starts talking about her poverty. Ray gives So-ah a red vial and says, "Mix this in Ha-baek's food so he forgets about the stone for a few days." So-ah takes the vial but throws it on the ground and breaks it with her foot. Then she says to Ray, "No matter what you do, I won't listen to you." Meanwhile, Ha-baek, with Mu-ra's help, is on his way to the same place. Mu-ra uses her powers to help Ha-baek get there quickly. When they arrive, Ha-baek tells So-ah to come to him. As So-ah is walking towards Ha-baek, Ray uses his powers to pull her back. After this, Ray uses his powers to dig up the ground around them, causing So-ah to almost fall. Ray then says to Ha-baek, "Use your powers to save your servant." Ha-baek says to Ray, "I know you have the stone." Hearing this, Ray stops his magic, and So-ah is saved. Then Ha-baek asks him, "So tell me, how did you lose your stone?" Ray is about to explain when So-ah comes up to him and slaps him hard. She then takes Mu-ra's car and drives away. Mu-ra says that that's my car, but So-ah doesn't listen and leaves. Ha-baek then approaches Ray and punches him hard, saying, "We'll talk about this later." After this, they also leave. Elsewhere, instead of going home, So-ah goes to her mother's grave and sits there. Meanwhile, Ha-baek waits for So-ah, but she doesn't show up. He then goes down to the street and keeps waiting for her. When So-ah arrives, she says, "I don't know what mistakes my ancestors made that I'm paying for." She looks very sad and says, "I don't know why all this is happening to me. It would have been better if I had died. First I lost my mother, then my father left me too. With a life like this, it's better to be dead." Ha-baek says to her, "I will take care of you." She replies, "I can take care of myself. I need someone who will always stay with me." Then Ha-baek holds her hand and says, "I will always stay with you." The next morning, So-ah goes to her clinic, where she remembers she was supposed to give property documents to Shin, but got kidnapped the previous day. She quickly calls Shin, and Shin says, "I'm standing outside the clinic." Shin then comes inside and asks for the documents, but So-ah says, "I don't have the documents right now. I need some time." Shin says, "All right." Meanwhile, Ha-baek goes to meet Ray and Mu-ra and asks them, "Where did you both lose the stone?" Mu-ra and Ray explain, "When we first came to Earth, we had a fight among ourselves. Then we are shown a flashback where Ray and Mu-ra are fighting with each other. During the fight, their stone falls. Ray says, 'We found 2 stones, but the third one is still missing.' He adds, 'There's only one way to find that stone. We can search for it using the map, but you lost the map.' Ha-baek then mentions finding the map and calls So-ah, saying, 'Quickly bring the car.' After the call, So-ah has to go to Ha-baek since he doesn't have a license. Ha-baek and So-ah reach the location, and Ha-baek starts searching for the map. So-ah asks, "What are you looking for?" He replies, "I am looking for a map that looks like a liquid." So-ah says, "All right, you search," and then sits on the side. She observes him from a distance and starts taking his pictures. Ha-baek notices her doing this and immediately comes to her, saying, "Let's take a picture together." But the picture doesn't turn out well. Then he moves closer to So-ah and says, "Now the picture will come out right." So-ah becomes quite nervous, and they take another picture together. As they are leaving, So-ah gets a call from her friend. Her friend says, "There's a fortune teller here who reveals everything." At first, So-ah ignores this conversation, but then she decides to visit the fortune teller. Ha-baek also reaches there and becomes very angry upon seeing that the fortune teller was from his planet and had been banished. Recalling all this, Ha-baek becomes even angrier. Meanwhile, the man also recognizes him and starts apologizing. He quickly coming up with an idea. The man pushes So-ah towards Ha-baek and runs away. Ha-baek chases him, but the man disappears. Nam-su-ri also tries to find him, but he's nowhere to be seen. Tired, Nam-su-ri, Ha-baek, and So-ah go to a restaurant to eat. During the meal, Ha-baek and So-ah argue about something, and Ha-baek walks out. Seeing So-ah upset, Nam-soo-ri feels bad and says, "We are about to find our stone. Then we'll leave this place." Hearing this, So-ah becomes very sad and thinks to herself, "Will Ha-baek also leave me now?" She packs the food and gets into the car, where Nam-soo-ri and Ha-baek are already seated. Ha-baek hands some papers to So-ah and says, "These are yours." So-ah quickly grabs the papers and asks, "Why did you tear them?" Ha-baek replies, "Because this land belongs to me, the water of the god, and I am the water of the god. How can you sell this land?" Hearing this, So-ah starts crying, gets out of the car, and runs away. Ha-baek steps out of the car and follows her. So-ah confesses her feelings to him, saying, "I like you and I don't want you to leave me." Saying this, So-ah walks away. Ha-baek calls out to her, but So-ah doesn't listen and keeps walking. Suddenly, a truck appears heading towards So-ah. Ha-baek screams when he sees the truck and tries to save So-ah, but it's too late, and the truck hits her. Ha-baek searches for So-ah but cannot find her anywhere. Ha-baek is distressed and looking for So-ah. Nam-soo-ri also arrives there. Then they see Ray carrying So-ah in his arms. Ha-baek feels a bit relieved and steps forward to talk to So-ah, but So-ah ignores him and walks away. In the next scene, So-ah takes a taxi to meet Shin. She goes to Shin's farmhouse, does a lot of work there, and distracts herself with tasks. Then she spends a pleasant time with Shin. In the following scene, as So-ah is heading home, she notices that Ha-baek is still standing in the same spot outside the house. Ha-baek approaches So-ah and says, "Please don't sell that land." He adds, "If you still want to sell it, that's your choice." In the next scene, Ha-baek goes to a place with Mu-ra. Mu-ra had been informed by the third god that they would find something special at that location. As they go further, they find a stone with blood on it. Both wonder, there are no humans here, so how can there be blood? Gods don't have blood, so whose blood could this be? In the following scene, Ha-baek and Mu-ra have a conversation. Mu-ra says, "I know you like So-ah, but remember, there can never be a relationship between humans and gods." Ha-baek does not respond to her. In the next scene, So-ah finalizes the land deal with Shin and signs all the documents. In the next scene, Ha-baek, Nam-soo-ri, and Mu-ra head to a restaurant together. There, they see Shin and So-ah together. Ha-baek thinks, "My relationship with So-ah is not strong enough yet, so I can't decide our future." Seeing this, Mu-ra says, "It's strange that you like So-ah, while I used to like you." In the next scene, when So-ah returns home, she notices that Ha-baek is no longer standing outside. This worries her. When she goes inside, she finds Ha-baek sitting there. Seeing her, Ha-baek says, "From now on, you won't see me standing there because I'm going back to my world." Hearing this, So-ah says, "This isn't right." That night, So-ah feels troubled, thinking, "How I sold the land despite Ha-baek's warning." The next morning, she goes to Ha-baek and says, "I want to ask why you didn't want me to sell the land, but I can't bring myself to ask." In the next scene, Mu-ra and Ray have captured the fortune teller named Gyul-rin. Mu-ra calls Ha-baek and says, "We've caught Gyul-rin." Ha-baek arrives there and goes straight to Gyul-rin. He shows him the bloodstained stone and asks, "Whose blood is this?" Gyul-rin says, "It's human blood, but there are no humans here and gods don't have blood, so it could belong to a mysterious person." Everyone starts thinking about this third mysterious person. Ha-baek's mind lands on one person, Shin. In the following scene, Ha-baek, Mu-ra, and Nam-soo-ri are sitting and talking. Suddenly, Ha-baek notices So-ah and Shin together. Feeling jealous, he walks over. So-ah says, "Don't create a scene." Then Ha-baek approaches Shin and whispers in his ear, "I've figured out who you are." This means the blood belonged to Shin, who is half god and half human. Shin is shocked. Then we see a flashback where the head priest tells Ha-baek, "There's a god whose mother was human and father was a god." He says, "This is why whenever that child was born, I felt pain like a human and also died like a human. But his father is a god, so he is reborn again and then dies like a human. This cycle continues. Just as you have the power of water, he has the power of fire. And when he comes before you, you will recognize him." In the next scene, Ha-baek tells Shin, "I know who you are." Hearing this, Shin becomes uneasy, and a fight starts between the two. Then Ha-baek says, "What is your true identity?" But Shin, panicking, leaves the place. His blood pressure drops, his face starts sweating, and he begins to remember his past. In the next scene, Ha-baek, Mu-ra, and Ray discusses, "Now we have also learned about the god who is half god and half human, Shin." Habayek does not have his powers. What will happen if Shin uses his powers on him? Habayek says Shin's is involved in Wind God's disappearance because when Shin came to Earth, Birayum vanished. In the next scene, Rei is sitting in a car with Habayek and Namsu Ri. Habayek is worried because Soa was getting very close to Shin and didn't know Shin's true identity. So he goes to Soa's clinic with Rei. Soa asks, "What are you doing here?" Habayek says, "I have come to take you from the clinic." Hearing this, So-Ah is a little surprised. Then the two of them go to a place together, and So-Ah thinks they will have a lot of fun. Habayek sits on different rides, and they also go to a haunted house where Habayek gets very scared. So-Ah takes him outside. Later, they sit somewhere together. Habayek asks her, "Why are you leaving this city?" In her heart, she says, "Because you too are going back to your world from here." Anyway, Habayek then tells So-Ah, "You look very cute today." So-Ah says, "Okay, thank you," and then starts laughing. The next day, when So-Ah is going to the clinic, Habayek stands above and watches her. Later, when So-Ah is at the clinic, Shin comes to her and says, "I remembered my past. My mother was very kind, but my father was very cruel. They left me in a strange and scary place, and then someone adopted me." Saying all this, he observes So-Ah's expressions, which remain completely normal. She says, "You are a good person. You have always helped me. You should believe in yourself. And yes, I completely trust you. You can never harm anyone." She consoles Shin and then leaves. Shin thinks, "It seems she still doesn't know my true identity." But he feels very happy because So-Ah cares for him. No one had ever understood him in this way before. In the next scene, a car comes towards Shin, but no one is in it. In reality, Rei is doing all this. He wants to see if Shin uses his powers or not. But when Shin doesn't do anything, Mu-Ra uses her power to stop the car and informs Habayek about the incident. In the next scene, Habayek comes to meet Shin. Shin says, "Relax. I will not use my powers to harm you." Then Mu-Ra also arrives there with a little girl who is calling out to Shin. Shin had adopted that little girl. Seeing the girl, Habayek and Mu-Ra leave the place. In the next scene, So-Ah is waiting for Habayek. Her friend reminds her, "Today is Mom's death anniversary." Hearing this, she becomes sad. Then she returns home and starts crying, while reminiscing about old times. At that moment, Habayek arrives and shows her sympathy. So-Ah visits her mother's grave and tells Habayek, "My mother died because of my father's strict behavior. My mother started drinking heavily, which led to liver cancer, and then she passed away." Saying this, she begins to cry. Habayek uses his powers to create 3 stars in the sky, which makes So-Ah very happy. Then Habayek says, "Tomorrow I will pick you up from the clinic." In the next scene, So-Ah meets Namsu Ri and asks him, "Why does Habayek not want me to sell that land?" Namsu Ri replies, "That land is the gateway for gods to come to Earth, and Habayek is a god. Protecting that land is his responsibility. If he doesn't do so, no one will consider him a god, and there are many gods who don't want him to become one." Hearing all this, So-Ah decides not to sell the land. She then goes to Shin and cancels the contract. In the next scene, So-Ah is waiting for Habayek and looking at her dream city map. Habayek approaches her and smiles, but suddenly his facial expressions change. Seeing this serious expression, So-Ah becomes scared and wonders what happened to him. Then Habayek runs towards So-Ah because he notices that the map he had been searching for all this time is behind So-Ah's dream city map. He recalls, "When I first fell on So-Ah, his map must have gotten stuck behind her dream map." In the next scene, Mu-Ra and Rei ask Shin how Birayum disappeared. Shin explains, "When I first came to Earth, I fell directly on Birayum. At that time, due to an electric shock, Birayum became unconscious. I got scared seeing him and left the place. After that, I don't know what happened to Birayum." Meanwhile, So-Ah and Habayek find Birayum using the map, but Birayum has lost his memory due to the electric shock. Because of this, he doesn't remember anything. In the next scene, all the gods gather in one place where Rei tries to restore Birayum's memory. Mu-Ra says to So-Ah, "What are you doing among us gods?" So-Ah replies, "You are a god, yet you don't understand how to speak to others." Hearing this, Mu-Ra angrily says, "Leave this place." So-Ah ignores her and walks away. Later, when she returns home, she notices, "Today, Habayek isn't standing at the spot where he always stands to pick me up," which makes her anxious. At that moment, Habayek calls her and says, "I'm standing at your backside." When So-Ah turns around, she sees that Habayek is indeed standing behind her. Habak says, "Why are you so late today?" Without replying, So-ah hugs him and says, "I really like you. Don't leave me." Habak says nothing, and So-ah walks away. Habak doesn't stop her because he knows they have no future together. In the next scene, So-ah and Habak have breakfast together. Then they decide to clean the house that day. While cleaning, they share happy moments with each other. However, So-ah becomes tired and lies down. She tells Habak, "You should rest too." Habak also lies down next to her. When So-ah sees him so close, she says, "Why are you lying so close to me?" Habak mischievously replies, "You yourself said to lie down next to you." So-ah says, "That's not what I meant." Habak jokingly says, "All right, but don't tell any other guy to do this next time." In the next scene, Mura is shooting at Shin's hotel. Ray also arrives there, and upon seeing Shin, angrily starts hitting him. However, instead of using his powers, Shin frees himself from Ray's grip on his own. Mura asks Ray, "I know you have some personal grudge against Shin, which is why you are doing all this." But Ray doesn't tell her what happened between him and Shin in the past. In the next scene, Shin meets So-ah and says, "I know we canceled the land contract, but in return, any of my office staff members who come to you for treatment, you will treat them for free." So-ah agrees to this. Then Shin shares his feelings with So-ah and says, "I like you and I will always respect your likes and dislikes." But So-ah clearly rejects him. Shin realizes that So-ah likes Habak. Habak sees this entire scene. Shin then steps outside and says to Habak, "I will never use my powers against you. You can rest assured. But when I first came to this world, I didn't like anyone. The only thing that attracted me was So-ah. I know she likes you, but I will try my best to win her heart." Saying this, Shin leaves, but Habak just looks at him angrily. In the next scene, So-ah calls Habak and asks him to meet her. When Habak arrives, she tells him, "I have canceled the land contract." Habak says, "I don't care about your relationship with Shin, because I am about to leave this place. If you can be happy with Shin, then I'll be happy too." Saying this, Habak starts to leave, but then he hears So-ah crying. So-ah says, "I like you." Habak hears this and, seeing So-ah so upset, runs toward her. He pulls her close, hugs her, and kisses her. They share their feelings with each other. Meanwhile, Habak gets a call from Mura, who tells him, "Biriam has regained consciousness, so you should come to my house." Hearing this, So-ah drives Habak to Mura's house, where Biriam gives him the third God Stone. Now Habak has all 3 God Stones, and he feels very happy. Biriam then goes to So-ah's house with Habak and says, "Habak, you should also tell her that you have received the third God Stone." Habak thinks, "So-ah might not be happy about this because now that I have all 3 God Stones, I must leave this world and return to my own." When So-ah hears this, she becomes sad because she knows that Habak will now go far away from her. In the next scene, Biriam says to Habak, "The way you behave with So-ah is not out of sympathy. I know you both like each other, and So-ah doesn't want you to ever leave Earth. She wants to stay with you forever. Trust me, I will always support both of you." In the next scene, Shin is walking somewhere when suddenly a man beats him up so badly that he is severely injured. Shin becomes so angry that he starts using his powers. At that moment, Gyulrin intervenes to stop them, and especially tells Shin, "Calm down." Shin composes himself and uses his powers to heal all his wounds. Then Shin receives a call from Ray, who says, "I did all this. Now you'll remember it for the rest of your life." Ray then tells a man standing near him, "You can forgive Shin, but I will never forgive him." Mu-Ra overhears this and tells Ray, "I am very angry with you for everything you're doing to Shin." Afterward, Mu-Ra deliberately starts praising Habak in front of Ray, knowing that Ray is jealous of Habak. Ray becomes even angrier because he liked Mu-Ra, but she only discussed Habak's personality in front of him. In the next scene, Habak sees an elderly man on the road who is struggling to do his work properly. Habak helps him. In return, the elderly man gives Habak some money and says, "Always help humans." In the next scene, Habak notices beautiful couple cups in a shop. He goes to the shopkeeper and says, "I want to buy these cups." Since Habak doesn't have enough money, he agrees to be model for the shop. The shopkeeper is so impressed by Habak's personality that she takes his pictures and gives him the cups. Habak then asks So-ah to meet him at a coffee shop. When So-ah arrives, Habak gives her the cups. So-ah finds the cups very beautiful. Habak says, "I did a part-time job today, and with the salary I earned, I bought these cups." He then shows So-ah pictures from his part-time job. In the next scene, Shin is drunk, and So-ah takes him to a place to help him relax. She begins unbuttoning his shirt so that he feels comfortable, but when Shin opens his eyes, he thinks Ha-Baek might be the one doing this to him. This misunderstanding arises because Ha-Baek had once unbuttoned Shin's shirt and seen a mark on his chest. In this confusion, Shin climbs onto So-Ah, but when he regains his senses, he sees it's So-Ah. Ha-Baek also sees all of this. Ha-Baek pulls Shin off So-Ah and slaps him hard. So-Ah steps between them and stops them from fighting. Shin apologizes to So-Ah and starts to leave, but So-Ah tries to stop him. At that moment, Ha-Baek grabs her hand, stops her, and angrily asks, "What's your relationship with Shin? What kind of connection do you two have?" Hearing this, So-Ah thinks, Ha-Baek doesn't trust me. She leaves because, for her, saying anything further feels meaningless. Later, Shin tells Gyul-rin, "I feel hatred for myself. I hurt So-Ah." Gyul-rin consoles him. Shin says, "I hurt the girl I like, and that's why I feel so much guilt." The next day, when So-Ah arrives at her clinic, she sees Ha-Baek sitting there. She asks him, "What were you doing here all night?" Ha-Baek replies, "You left the clinic in anger but forgot to lock it. I thought someone might steal something from the clinic, so I stayed here all night. Then I fell asleep." Hearing this, So-Ah looks at Ha-Baek angrily and ignores him as she walks away. Ha-Baek stops her and says, "I really like you, and I want us to spend good time together while I'm here." So-Ah angrily responds, "Whatever the case, you shouldn't have treated Shin the way you did." Saying this, she walks away. Meanwhile, Mu-Ra asks Rei, "Why don't you tell me what your conflict with Shin is? Why do you behave this way with him?" But Rei doesn't tell her anything. Mu-Ra spends the whole day with Rei, trying to find out what happened between Shin and Rei that led to such behavior. In the next scene, Ha-Baek, frustrated by So-Ah's behavior, drinks so much that he loses control. Rei is with him, enjoying Ha-Baek's state, and starts recording a video of him. Ha-Baek, being heavily intoxicated, becomes the target of some people who begin to tease him, leading to a fight. Rei keeps recording from the background, but when he notices that Ha-Baek's powers aren't activating and the situation could turn serious, he steps in and protects Ha-Baek. In the next scene, So-Ah is walking home, thinking about Ha-Baek, when she receives a call from Shin. Gyul-rin had earlier told Shin, "Whether anyone listens to you or not, a servant of God will always listen to you." That's why Shin calls So-Ah. So-Ah speaks kindly to him and consoles him. Her caring nature makes Shin even more attracted to her. In the following scene, Rei carries the intoxicated Ha-Baek on his shoulders to So-Ah's house and says, "Take care of him now, he's had too much to drink." So-Ah supports Ha-Baek, walking him step by step to his room. However, Ha-Baek, still very drunk, falls straight onto So-Ah. So-Ah gets furious and tries to push him off her. But Ha-Baek, in his dazed state, says to her, "I'll do whatever you say. Just let me stay close to you for a while." Then the two fall asleep close to each other like that. Meanwhile, Mu-Ra watches Ha-Baek's video on Rei's phone. She transfers the video to her own phone as well. The next day, Ha-Baek tells So-Ah, "Tell me a wish of yours. When my powers activate, the first thing I'll do is fulfill your wish." So-Ah replies, "My final wish is to meet my father." Ha-Baek says, "I wish I had the divine tap. If servants have the divine tap, they can fulfill any one wish." Then changing the topic, he says to So-Ah, "Let's cook together today." Ha-Baek and So-Ah go shopping for ingredients and then start cooking together at home. Ha-Baek prepares various dishes in a very organized way, but So-Ah can't get a single dish right. Seeing So-Ah's clumsy cooking, Ha-Baek scolds her. On the other side, Mu-Ra watches Ha-Baek's video, hearing the parts where Ha-Baek says, "So-Ah, I really like you. I can't live without you." Hearing this, Mu-Ra gets very angry and decides to visit So-Ah. Mu-Ra goes to So-Ah's house. There, she confronts So-Ah and says, "You should be ashamed of yourself. You're stopping Ha-Baek from returning to his world. Do you even realize that there can never be a relationship between gods and humans?" Then she adds, "You want to know why you are a servant of God, don't you? Come, I'll tell you." Ha-Baek overhears Mu-Ra's words and stops her from saying anything further. Mu-Ra uses her powers to take So-Ah to a different place and says, 1,600 years ago, Ha-Baek fell in love with a girl, but that girl's family had ties with the Sky God. The Sky God wanted Ha-Baek's powers to be taken away, so he would only follow their orders. Because of this, the girl started trapping Ha-Baek in her love. Mu-Ra continues, When the water god found out about this, he took revenge for the injustice done to him. He killed the girl. When he tried to kill her brother and son as well, her brother said, "Don't kill us. We are ready to become servants of God. And that's why today, you are a servant of the water god." Hearing all this, So-ah becomes distressed. Mu-ra tells her, "Don't have any relationship with Ha-baek. If you don't want the story from 1600 years ago to repeat, and you don't want Ha-baek to face trouble because of you, stay away from him. Force him to return to his own world." Hearing this, So-ah becomes very upset. When she returns home, Ha-baek asks her, "Is everything alright? What did Mu-ra say to you?" So-ah replies, "I don't want any relationship with you. I don't want you to get into trouble because of me. So it's better if you forget me and go back to your world. There's no place for you here." Hearing this, Ha-baek feels deeply hurt. That night, both are very sad and think about each other. The next day, Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri come to say goodbye to So-ah. Ha-baek tells So-ah, "I'm going back. Take care of yourself. Come home on time, eat on time, and work carefully at your clinic." Hearing this, tears well up in So-ah's eyes. Then Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri leave through the same door they came from. Before leaving, Ha-baek turns back once and remembers all the moments he spent with So-ah. Then Ha-baek and Nam-soo-ri return to their world. After Ha-baek leaves, So-ah tries to keep herself busy and starts working at the clinic. Shin visits the clinic and insists on taking So-ah out for dinner. So-ah initially refuses, but when Shin insists further, she agrees. So-ah and Shin go to a place for dinner. There, Shin tells So-ah, "I really like you. By now, we know a lot about each other's habits, which means we've become quite close. Can we be good friends?" So-ah says, "Why not?" and shakes his hand. Mu-ra and Ray see this from a distance. Ray gets angry at Shin and moves forward to hit him, but Mu-ra grabs his hand and stops him. Because of this, Ray leaves, and Mu-ra follows him. After dinner, when So-ah gets home, she misses Ha-baek a lot. Unable to control her emotions, she starts crying loudly. In the next scene, Mu-ra meets Shin and says, "I want you to build a close relationship with So-ah." Mu-ra says this because she wants to bring Shin closer to So-ah and keep her away from Ha-baek. Later, when So-ah is on her way home, Shin calls her to ensure she doesn't feel lonely. He secretly follows her, but So-ah remains unaware. Upon reaching home, she finds Ha-baek waiting for her. She is surprised to see him and immediately hugs him. Shin also witnesses this. When they go inside, Nam-soo-ri tells So-ah, "Ha-baek has been given a new mission to find out why the 3 stones were placed on Earth." Later, So-ah goes to Ha-baek's room, where they kiss, sharing a romantic moment. The next morning, Ha-baek, Nam-soo-ri, and So-ah have breakfast together. So-ah is very happy that Ha-baek has returned. In the next scene, So-ah says, "Now that you've regained your powers, fulfill one of my wishes." Nam-soo-ri replies, "We can't use our powers on Earth yet." Ha-baek then says, "I've brought something to show you." They both show her their driving licenses. So-ah gets angry, thinking Ha-baek had brought her a special gift. In another scene, Gyul-rin tells Shin, "If So-ah accepts you for who you truly are, that's fine. But if she isn't willing to accept you, you should let her go." Later, Mu-ra arrives and tells Shin, "Get as close to So-ah as you can, but make sure she doesn't get close to Ha-baek." Ray overhears this conversation and tells Mu-ra, "Let's go from here." As Mu-ra starts to leave, her heel causes her to lose balance. Shin steps forward to help her and holds her hand. Seeing this, Ray gets furious and slaps Shin hard. He then takes Mu-ra away. Outside, Mu-ra asks Ray, "Why did you slap Shin?" When Ray doesn't respond, Mu-ra slaps him and says, "Leave from here." Ray leaves after this. Meanwhile, Ha-baek and So-ah spend happy moments together, confessing their love for each other and sharing intimate moments. In the next scene, So-ah visits Shin at his office because he had called her for a checkup. Ray sees them together and tells So-ah, "Do you even know Shin's true identity?" This leads to a fight between Shin and Ray. During the scuffle, So-ah falls, and both Shin and Ray disappear. When So-ah looks up, she realizes that neither Shin nor Ray is there anymore. Elsewhere, Mu-ra and Ha-baek are talking when Ha-baek gets a call from So-ah. She tells him everything. At the same time, Shin and Ray are fighting at another location. Ha-baek and Mu-ra arrive there and stop their fight. Meanwhile, So-ah feels very troubled and starts wondering if Shin is also a god. When Ha-baek returns home, So-ah begins asking him about Shin. Seeing this, Ha-baek becomes very sad. In the next scene, Ha-baek thinks, "In the past, I sent Ray to find a girl I liked, but that girl betrayed me, so she was hiding herself from all humans." When I told Ray to find her, he returned unsuccessful. Then Habayek goes to Ray's house and asks him, "The girl I sent you to find, did you really try to look for her?" We are then shown a flashback where Habayek had sent Ray to search for that girl. Ray was accompanied by his secretary Jin and Ray's younger brother. They were all searching for the girl, but there was a big fight happening there. Shin was also present and saw that injustice was being done to the girl and her family. He immediately intervened and injured everyone, including Ray and his brother. This was the reason Ray hated Shin. The wind god Kdrama was also there, but got electrocuted and became unconscious. After this incident, his secretary protected Ray and his brother, while Shin tried to save the girl, her family, and everyone present there. Kdrama possessed a divine relic, but after being electrocuted, it fell there, and Kdrama lost his memory as well. When Shin saw Kdrama and became scared, Soa's father came to protect Kdrama. He covered Kdrama with his coat and ensured his safety. In the present, Mu-Ra and Secretary Jin overhear Ray talking to Habayek about the girl and the fight. Then Mu-Ra approaches Ray and says, "I heard everything you said. Today I understand why you hate Shin. Your frustrated behavior now makes sense to me." Then Mu-Ra hugs Ray. Ray also confesses his love for Mu-Ra and kisses her. Meanwhile, Shin feels very sad and thinks, "I always helped humans, but no one ever understood me. Only So-Ah understood me, cared for me, and always comforted me." That's why he had locked himself in one place. In the next scene, Habayek becomes so stressed due to Ray's words that he hugs So-Ah as soon as he gets home and asks about her well-being. So-Ah happily says, "I'm perfectly fine." Then she says, "I'm going out to get some things." On her way back, she is kidnapped, and all her belongings fall to the ground. Habayek wonders why So-Ah hasn't returned home after so long. When he looks outside, he sees all her belongings scattered on the road. He wonders where So-Ah could have gone. It is then revealed that the one who kidnapped So-Ah is none other than Gyul-Rin. Gyul-Rin tells So-Ah, "I had a specific reason to kidnap you, and that is because Shin has locked himself in a room for many days. He's not coming out. You are my last hope. He likes you and will listen to everything you say. Help me." So-Ah informs Habayek about everything and goes to Shin's room herself. There, she tries to talk to Shin, and then Shin tells her, "Leave from here. I could hurt you too." So-Ah hugs him from behind, calming him down. Then she consoles him and says, "You are a very good person. You have helped so many people. Trust yourself and don't imprison yourself like this." She manages to calm him down significantly, but Habayek sees all this and angrily takes So-Ah away from there. In the car, So-Ah keeps thinking about Shin and says to Habayek, "Shin is a very good person." Habayek becomes very angry and tightly grabs So-Ah's hand. Even after reaching home, So-Ah keeps talking about Shin to Habayek. Habayek kisses her in different ways, and then So-Ah keeps recalling those kisses and thinks about her relationship with Habayek. Will he always stay with me? Why did he kiss me? In the next scene, Habayek's shirt is so wet that So-Ah is stunned to see his hot body. She wonders how someone can look so hot. Later, So-Ah visits Shin at his office, where a little girl is also with him. Shin tells So-Ah, "I saved this girl from a dog, but during the treatment, she lost her eyesight." Then he asks, "So-Ah, have we ever met before?" So-Ah says, "No." Shin responds, "Okay, when I first came to this earth, I hurt everyone. I killed everyone I came across. Then one day someone hugged me from behind, and after that, I never hurt anyone again. I always helped humans. That's why I thought we might have met before." In the next scene, So-Ah's friend Yeon-Mi is shown. Yeon-Mi has a recurring bad dream where So-Ah is about to die, completely drenched. In the dream, Yeon-Mi asks So-Ah, "What happened?" So-Ah points towards black shoes. In the following scene, So-Ah is cleaning her clinic. She video calls Habayek and asks him to meet her. During this, she notices some of Habayek's hot photos and gives a flustered expression. Sometime later, Habayek arrives at So-Ah's clinic, but Shin is already there. The two are so jealous of each other that they start fighting. So-Ah intervenes and calms them down. Then Habayek hands Shin the clinic's key and says, "Here's the clinic key. Lock it before you leave." He then takes So-Ah away with a mysterious smile. In the next scene, So-Ah smiles, thinking about how jealous Habayek is of Shin. The two go to the seaside, where So-Ah says, "I have only one wish, and that is to meet my father." Habayek finds her so cute while saying this that he kisses her and hugs her. In the next scene, Habayek and So-Ah are having breakfast, which Habayek cooked, but then the doorbell rings. So-Ah opens the door to find Shin standing there. Shin says to So-Ah, I closed the clinic, but I needed to return the key to you, so I had to come here. The three of them eat breakfast together. Ha-baek is very angry. Shin compliments So-ah, saying, the food you made is very good. Meanwhile, Ha-baek thinks, he doesn't know anything about So-ah. I should tell him about her likes and dislikes, and then So-ah will be impressed with me. He says, So-ah can't cook and only cleans the house twice a week. Hearing this, So-ah hides her face under the table and thinks, why is Ha-baek saying this about me? Shin says to So-ah, I have reduced the rent for your clinic and also purchased the building where your clinic is located. Ha-baek sees So-ah becoming very happy upon hearing this, and he feels very jealous. Then Shin invites So-ah to visit his farmhouse. In the next scene, Ha-baek is exercising when he suddenly starts sweating. So-ah takes care of him and gives him a towel. During this time, they grow even closer. In the following scene, Mura comes to meet Ha-baek while he and So-ah are walking together. Mura delivers a message from Godland saying, Godland has summoned you back. If you do not return, you will have to remain on this earth forever, and they will never call you back. In the next scene, Ha-baek becomes troubled by Mura's words, thinking, what should I do now? Just then, So-ah approaches him and says, don't worry, you should go back. That world also needs you. If you become the king there, nothing would make me happier. Ha-baek thinks to himself, I know you're not saying this out of your own will. You just want me to become the king of his world and stay happy. But you don't realize that my happiness lies only with her. In the next scene, So-ah takes Ha-baek to the place where she once tried to end her life. She tells him, look at my bad luck. I even survived this. She starts crying, so Ha-baek hugs her and kisses her. She says, my father was a very good man, but my luck is so bad that I couldn't meet him. My final wish is to see my father. She continues, after my father's death, I felt like no one loved me, but then you came into my life, and you gave me so much love. Thank you for loving me. In the next scene, So-ah's friend Yeom-mi dreams again that So-ah is drenched and about to die. This time, she also sees another person in the dream. The next day, Yeom-mi visits So-ah and says, I had the same dream again. You were drenched and you died. When she sees a picture of So-ah's father in her room, Yeom-mi says, yes, I remember. I also saw this man in my dream, and then he died. Hearing this, So-ah is shocked. So-ah refuses to believe Yeom-mi and asks her to leave. Ha-baek overhears all of this. When So-ah comes to Ha-baek, he says, forgive me. Even though I am a god, I couldn't fulfill your final wish. I hope that after I leave, you can achieve your desires. Hearing this, So-ah starts crying. The next morning, Ha-baek and So-ah decide, as long as we are together, we will enjoy every moment and stay as close as possible. Later, Ha-baek and So-ah go shopping for clothes and share their feelings with each other. When So-ah appears in a bridal dress, she looks stunning. Ha-baek cannot take his eyes off her. They share their deep emotions with each other and look like the best couple. They also have a photo shoot together. In the next scene, Bi-ryum says to Shin, the person who saved you also had my divine relic. Shin replies, yes, I remember. That person used to say, please let me meet my daughter. And I saw the divine relic with him. Bi-ryum thinks the divine relic can only be seen by servants of the divine. And that person's name was Yoon Sung-jun, while So-ah's name is Yoon So-ah. This means he was So-ah's father. Bi-ryum then goes to So-ah and asks, have you met your father in the past few years? Hearing this, So-ah becomes sad, and understanding the situation, Ha-baek takes Bi-ryum outside and asks him, what is all this? Bi-ryum explains everything in detail, and then they both go to the place where So-ah had tried to end her life. In the next scene, Shin takes advantage of the moment and tells So-ah about her father. He was a good man. He helped me when I was very scared. Then, a flashback scene is shown where, during a fight, Bi-ryum becomes unconscious, and Shin gets scared seeing all this. But then So-ah's father arrives. He covers Shin with his coat and comforts him. In the next scene, Ha-baek is telling So-ah everything about her father. Another flashback is shown where So-ah's father has the divine tap and makes his final wish to meet So-ah. Then, he actually sees So-ah standing on a bridge, trying to take her own life. Her father immediately runs to save her, but he himself falls deep into the water and, while trying to save So-ah, drowns and dies. In the present, So-ah hugs Ha-baek and, crying, says, you are a god, right? Please let me meet my father just once. Because of all this, So-ah's health deteriorates. In the next scene, Bi-ryum, Mura, and Ray come to meet Ha-baek and ask about So-ah's health. Habayek says, I have decided. I will definitely let So-ah meet her father. Mura says, remember, if you do this, you will never be able to return to your world and will disappear from there. So-ah hears all this and tells Habayek, I have already lost my father. I don't have the courage to lose you now. I don't want you to do all this. Habayek comes close to her and says, promise me that after I leave, you will always take care of yourself and will never regret anything in your heart. So-ah was upset, but she still promises him. In the next scene, Habayek and So-ah go to the place where So-ah had tried to end her life. Habayek brings her very close, kisses her, and holds her tightly. So-ah understands that Habayek has brought her there to let her meet her father. Then Habayek holds her even tighter, and both of them go underwater where So-ah's father's body was. So-ah retrieves her father's body and buries him according to her customs. After this, Habayek says goodbye to So-ah for the last time, but So-ah says, I prayed. Then Mura, Birayum, and Ray arrive. Birayum tells So-ah, I retrieved this divine tap from your father's body. Now, make the wish that Habayek never disappears. So-ah is about to make this wish when the head priest arrives and says, Habayek was sent here for a purpose, and today he has succeeded in fulfilling that purpose. The head priest says, I have been watching both of you. Once I appeared before Habayek as an old man, and Habayek helped me. I told him to help humans. After this, Habayek remembers that the head priest sent him to Earth to find out why the 3 god stones were sent there. Then Habayek tells the head priest, I now understand the true meaning of the purpose you gave me. The god stones were sent to protect humans so that they could help them on this Earth. The head priest says, yes, exactly. Then the head priest tells So-ah, Habayek will never disappear now. He will stay with you on this Earth. Make another wish. Saying this, the head priest leaves. Then So-ah looks at Habayek and makes a wish. As long as I live, may Habayek always stay with me. And when I die, may he become the king of his world. Meanwhile, Shin also sees all this and feels very happy for So-ah because Shin, too, has become someone who helps humans. Then Habayek leaves with the head priest. So-ah waits for Habayek because Habayek had gone to his world with the head priest for a few days. Then, holding a white flower in her hand, So-ah steps out of her clinic and is walking toward her house. She sees Habayek standing outside her house in the same place where he always waited for her. So-ah immediately runs to him and hugs him. Then, holding each other's hands, they walk towards So-ah's house. And with this, the drama ends. How much rating would you give this drama? And which was your favorite scene? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the videos.